Obamagate 2: Treason and Seditious Conspiracy. Obama asks the UK to spy on Donald Trump and his presidential campaign. Obama's treason and seditious conspiracy. We know that Obama personally asked the UK to spy on the Trump campaign, and that this was approved by the then Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson. See the document that follows this slide. This was taken from the incredible book by Greg Rubini, which is available on Amazon. In this document here from Greg Rubini's book shows that the UK's GCHQ director confirmed that Obama spied on Trump and his campaign using British intelligence assets organised as Project Folsom. So you can see here in this document that it's an official GCHQ document signed by Robert Hannigan and addressed to Boris Johnson, the then Secretary of State for Foreign and Commonwealth Affairs. See, point number 1 is where the permission to execute Project Folsom was at the request of the US President, seeking intelligence gathering into the Trump Organization and Donald J. Trump for President Incorporated. And then see at point number 4 that the US National Security Advisor, that's Susan Rice, had requested that we continue our surveillance during the transition period as internal US intelligence is potentially compromised by the incoming Trump administration. That there is spying, pure and simple. And it's spying to gain political advantage with a foreign entity, Britain, so that's treason, for seditious purposes. Watch the following clip. Now, having watched lots of Obama videos, it becomes very easy to tell when he's lying because he can't ever look the interviewer in the eye. Keep a close eye on that, just in this little clip. But what he's trying to do here is to perpetuate the story that Donald Trump had colluded with the Russians.
And that's something that I'm also going to be thinking a lot about in my afterlife, my post-presidency.
You talked about this with the comedian Trevor Noah the other day, and you said a number of things in a row. You observed that there had been contacts between members of Mr. Trump's staff and Russian officials.
Right.
You noted that Trump benefited from the hacks. Your spokesman, Josh Earnest, has gone on to say this week that it's obvious that Trump knew what was going on. To what extent are you suggesting some kind of cooperation between the president-elect and Russian officials here?
Well, I'm not suggesting cooperation at all. Keep in mind that those statements were in the context of everyone now acting surprised by the CIA assessment that this was done purposely to improve Trump's chances. And my only point was that shouldn't be treated as a blockbuster because that was the worst kept secret in this town. Everybody understood that. It was reported on. Steve, if you go back and look at your stories, if you read any mainstream publication, you would see that if you have a hack of the DNC and a hack of Hillary Clinton's most senior advisor's emails, and those things are then released in drip, drip, drip fashion over the course of months, and that seem to generate consistently negative coverage, despite the fact that there's nothing in there that's particularly controversial, that it's mostly just, as I said, political gossip or routine emails between folks who are working in a campaign environment, then it's a pretty clear inference that people would draw and did draw.
On the 22nd of November 2016, the head of the NSA went to meet with the Trump team, but he didn't give Obama a heads up. This was Admiral Mike Rogers, NSA director, visiting the Trump transition team in Trump Tower, New York. He told the president-elect that Obama was spying on him and his team. But notice here that he didn't pick up the telephone. He went to see him in person because he was being spied on. In retaliation, Trump tweeted out, "Terrible. Just found out that Obama had my wires tapped in Trump Tower just before the victory. Nothing found. This is McCarthyism." The next tweet was, "How low has President Obama gone to tap my phones during the very sacred election process? This is Nixon Watergate. Bad or sick guy." And then said, "Is it legal for a sitting president to be wiretapping a race for the president prior to an election? Turned down by a court earlier, a new low." As a consequence, Donald Trump moved his transition team from Trump Tower in New York to one of his private golf club resorts in New Jersey.
I think spying on a political campaign is a big deal. It's a big deal. Generation I grew up in, which was the Vietnam War period, people were all concerned about spying on anti-war people and so forth by the government. And there were a lot of rules put in place to make sure that there's an adequate basis before our law enforcement agencies get involved in political surveillance. I'm not suggesting that those rules were violated, but I think it's important to look at that.
So you're not suggesting, though, that spying occurred?
I don't, I guess you could, I think spying did occur. Yes, I think spying did occur.
Well, let me...
But the question is whether it was adequately predicated. And I'm not suggesting it wasn't adequately predicated, but I need to explore that. I think it's my obligation. Congress is usually very concerned about intelligence agencies and law enforcement agencies staying in their proper lane, and I want to make sure that happened. We have a lot of rules about that. And I want to say that I've said I'm reviewing this. I haven't set up a team yet, but I have in mind having some colleagues help me pull all this information together and let me know whether there's some areas that should be looked at.
For President Obama, we might not have done the intelligence community assessment that we did that set off a whole sequence of events which are still unfolding today, notably Special Counsel Mueller's investigation. President Obama is responsible for that, and it was he who tasked us to do that intelligence community assessment in the first place.
And it was he who tasked us to do that intelligence community assessment in the first place.
And oh, by the way, the then Commander-in-Chief, President Obama, told us to assemble all the reporting that we had available to us and put it in one report that the President could pass on to the Congress and to the next administration. And while we're at it, declassify as much as we possibly could to make it public. And that's what we did. Disconcerting now to be investigated for, having done our duty and done what we were told to do by the President.
I just think back to that document from GCHQ, and it was signed by Robert Hannigan. On the 23rd of January 2017, after only 2 years in charge and aged only 51, he resigned. Only 3 days after the Trump inauguration. Was this a coincidence? And only 4 days later, Prime Minister Theresa May raced to New York to see President Trump. Another coincidence? And back to the book by Greg Rubini. Rubini claims that what you've just seen will lead to the indictment and the conviction of Barack Hussein Obama, that the sentence for treason and seditious conspiracy will declare him an enemy combatant, and the sentence will be the death penalty. Now, watch this clip of Lindsey Graham in the Senate interviewing Brett Kavanaugh for his seat on the Supreme Court. There is no precedent for a Supreme Court judge being asked about enemy combatants and military tribunals. And so why would this suddenly be relevant?
So when somebody says post 9/11 that we've been at war and it's called the war on terrorism, do you generally agree with that concept?
I do, Senator, because Congress passed the authorization for use of military force, which is still in effect, and that was passed, of course, on September 14th, 2001, 3 days later.
Let's talk about the law in war. Is there a body of law called the law of armed conflict?
There is such a body, Senator.
Is there a body of law that's called basic criminal law?
Yes, Senator.
Are there differences between those two bodies of law?
Yes, Senator.
From an American citizen's point of view, do your constitutional rights follow you? If you're in Paris, does the Fourth Amendment protect you as an American from your own government?
From your own government, yes.
Okay. So if you're in Afghanistan, do your constitutional rights protect you against your own government?
If you're an American in Afghanistan, you have constitutional rights as against the U.S. government.
Is there a long-standing...
That's long settled law.
Isn't there also a long-settled law that it goes back to the Eisentrager case? I can't remember the name of it.
Yeah, Johnson versus Eisentrager.
Right. That American citizens who collaborate with the enemy have considered enemy combatants.
They can be.
They
can be. They're sometimes criminally prosecuted, sometimes treated in the military.
Well, let's talk about can be. I think
under Supreme Court precedent.
Right. There's a Supreme Court decision that said that American citizens who collaborated with Nazi saboteurs were tried by the military. Is that correct?
That is correct.
I think a couple of them were executed.
Yeah.
So if anybody doubts, there's a long-standing history in this country that your constitutional rights follow you wherever you go, but you don't have a constitutional right to turn on your own government and collaborate with the enemy of the nation. You'll be treated differently. What's the name of the case, if you can recall, that reaffirmed the concept that you could hold one of our own as an enemy combatant if they were engaged in terrorist activities in Afghanistan? Are you familiar with that case?
Yeah, Hamdi.
Okay. So the bottom line is, I want every American citizen to know you have constitutional rights, but you do not have a constitutional right to collaborate with the enemy. There's a body of law well developed long before 9/11 that understood the difference between basic criminal law and the law of armed conflict. Do you understand those differences?
I do understand that there are different bodies of law, of course.
I'll end this presentation by introducing Saul Alinsky. Alinsky, 1909 to 1972, was a far-left Chicago-based community activist and political theorist. In his widely cited Rules for Radicals, Pragmatic Primer in 1971, Alinsky defended the arts both of confrontation and of compromise involved in community organizing as keys to the struggle for social justice. He was an idol of another Chicago-based radical community activist, Barack Hussein Obama. Alinsky said, "True revolutionaries do not flaunt their radicalism. They cut their hair, they put on suits, and infiltrate the system from within. Look at the difference between top left Ernesto Che Guevara, the revolutionary from Argentinian, but he was involved in the Cuban Revolution with Fidel Castro, and bottom right, Barack Hussein Obama."